very warm welcome to you all to this lunchtime webinar, Investing in a Fairer, Greener World. My name is Rosie Venner. I work for the JustMoney movement. And on behalf of all those who've been involved in organising today's webinar, I want to thank you for joining us. Do take time to introduce yourselves to each other in the chat. Over the next hour, together with speakers from Community Energy England, Ethex and Energise Africa, we hope to give you a good introduction to investing in positive change. We want to explore what does it look like in practice to align our money with the change we want to see in the world. A couple of Zoom notices and housekeeping as we start. So we will keep everybody muted, but the chat is open for you to ask questions or ask for clarification, particularly as we get to the question and answer section near the end. The webinar is being recorded and we'll be sending out a link to the recording in the next few days with the slides and links to resources that are mentioned by the speakers. And next slide, please. And I do need to draw your attention to our disclaimer. So we're talking about investments today. Events like this are part of our work to help individuals and churches explore ethical issues surrounding their finances. But at JustMoney Movement, we don't provide financial advice. Reference to investment products here and on our website are by way of example. So if you wish to receive advice, please consult a qualified and independent financial advisor. Today's webinar is taking place during Good Money Week, which runs from the 6th to the 12th of October in the lead up to Good Money Sunday this weekend, which is an opportunity for churches to join in with wider movements across civil society who are interested in making more ethical, sustainable financial choices that are good for people and planet. So it's a great topic to be exploring, and I'm looking forward to hearing from our speakers and the questions that you have and the discussion that we can have together towards the end. But first, a very short introduction to JustMoney Movement for those who are new to our work. Next slide, please. We are an ecumenical Christian charity. We work with partners from all faiths and none, and our aim is to grow a bigger, more diverse movement of individuals and churches who share the vision of a world where money is used to shape a fairer, greener future. And we do this through educational workshops and training like this, online and in person, through guides and resources on our website, and through campaigning and advocacy. We believe that this stronger movement of people and churches making more ethical choices with our own finances and speaking up and campaigning for change in the wider system opens up political space for systemic change and improved corporate behaviour from banks, companies and other institutions. For example, we're currently campaigning for climate risk to be considered within the government's pension reforms so that the £3 trillion in UK pensions is invested in ways that are more sustainable. Next slide, please, Annie. And you can skip forward one more. So today's webinar is more about the practical than the theological exploration of investment. But we know that for many in the JustMoney movement and within wider church networks, it's our faith and the values and principles that underpin our faith that drive our interest in how we use and steward money. This quote from the theologian and Old Testament scholar Walter Brueggemann is one I often like to start workshops with. As an encouragement, I offer it to you today. How might you manage your finances in a way that is good for the entire community, for the practice of justice? And we'll be exploring some great examples of that today. Next slide. And finally, for those who might be exploring ethical investment for the first time, I hope you'll find today's webinar a helpful introduction. I'm aware that some of you will also have been involved in ethical investing for many years. The language around investing can be quite complex and daunting, so do let us know in the chat if there's anything that you want clarifying. There are lots of different interconnected approaches and ways of going about ethical investing, and lots of different ways of talking about ethical investing, whether that's sustainable investing, responsible investing. We have found at JustMoney Movement that this is a really helpful framework to use, these three words: avoid, engage and embrace. So ethical investment can include avoiding investing in specific sectors like gambling, fossil fuels, alcohol, tobacco, arms companies. It's often called negative screening. And it also includes divesting, taking your money away from things you no longer want to be invested in. You'd be very familiar, I'm sure, with the fossil fuel divestment movement. It can also include engaging, so using your voice as a shareholder to engage with companies for change, or encouraging your fund manager or pension provider to do this on your behalf. And it can also include that word embrace, investing positively in businesses that do good, sometimes known as impact investing. And today we're really looking in more detail at that embrace approach. How can we invest in ways that bring about positive social and environmental impact? And we've got three great speakers. Well, I'm hoping we've got three. We've got two on the call and hopefully one joining us soon. And I'll introduce them now so that as we move on, we can kind of go seamlessly through. So first, we're going to hear from John Taylor. John is the Head of Capacity Building and Strategic Development at Community Energy England. John has worked for many years in local government advisory roles, focusing on climate change action and community energy, and is a strong believer in the power of stories to inspire and motivate us through imagining more hopeful and positive visions of the future. And we'll also be hearing from Chris Butler. Chris is Director and Acting CEO at Ethex. His career in finance and investment spans 36 years in various different roles, including as a portfolio manager and then director of a global investment firm. In a voluntary capacity, Chris is Treasurer of the Oxford Circuit of the Methodist Church and an advisor to Christian Aid's Finance, Fundraising and Investment Committee. And we're hoping also to be joined by Ray Coyle. Ray is the CEO of Energise Africa. He's an experienced social entrepreneur, having run a number of impact-oriented businesses. He has wide experience of the renewable energy sector and has also advised extensively on transactions in emerging markets. Ray also currently sits on the England Committee of the National Lottery Community Fund, Europe's largest grant-making body. So with that introduction, I'm going to hand over to John to talk to us a little bit more about the work of Community Energy England. Over to you, John.
Great, thank you very much. Lovely to be here with you all on this lunchtime. Let me just share my slides for you and we'll get underway. Okay, yes, so my name's John Taylor. I'm work for an organisation called Community Energy England. We are the national membership body that represents over 300 local social enterprises, cooperatives, local authorities and companies who are working across the country to bring about local ownership of renewable energy and to help people become more involved in working towards net zero and climate action, whether that's generating renewable energy, giving people in their community advice on how to save money at home and be more warm and healthy in terms of fuel poverty, and then working with local companies, charities, schools to build up kind of the most resilient situation in terms of electrified heating and local energy supply, very diverse. It reminded me, as I was preparing this, I actually started my career in renewable energy kind of mid to late 2000s. So I studied at the Centre for Alternative Technology in Wales. But the bit that put me in that direction is I read an article in Permaculture magazine called The Permaculture of Pensions. And it was all about the irrationality of investing our pensions in the kind of stock market and fossil fuel companies that, from the timeline I was looking at when I retire in the mid 21st century, would probably not create a very nice world to retire into. And it was arguing we should be investing our pensions and savings into building resilience in our communities and in tackling climate change. And that made so much sense to me. Yeah, and it kind of tipped me in this direction. So nice to be with you today to see it through. In terms of what is community energy, if you're not familiar with it, it's using people as neighbours coming together as a community to use social enterprise, mutuals and cooperative business models to build out and own renewable energy systems. The picture there is Westmill Wind and Solar Farm in Oxfordshire, which is probably one of the most recognisable flagship schemes we have in the country. But yeah, it's a farmer wanted to do renewable, but he wanted to bring people with him. So he invited the community to co-invest in the project with him. And now all the people in that picture are shareholders of this community-owned renewable energy assets. And once you actually have this kind of these energy assets in community control, it allows you to do so much more good with it as well. these are often crowd-funded, using kind of community shares or community bonds to allow people to invest their own savings in the project. So, for example, if you can't have solar panels on your own roof because you live in a flat or a listed building, you can pool your savings with others to have a common share of a community asset like this. It's an enterprise in that you're trading electricity you're selling it back to the grid or to a business or a community that needs it. And then you're making a small surplus on that. It's a not-for-profit business model. So any surpluses usually go into a local community social impact fund. And then because the mutual and cooperative society is democratic, people can then vote once a year, as a community on what do they do with that financial surplus from these clean energy profits. A lot of them use it to run education programs or fuel poverty outreach work. But because it's democratic, it's really whatever people feel their local need is. We've seen food banks, rural bus services, all sorts come out of these schemes. Yeah, so our mission really is putting people at the heart of this clean power transition. As a convener of the membership network at Community Energy, we try and visualize the impact all our hundreds of members are having into something kind of we can present back to government and other people in the energy sector about the impact we collectively have. So in terms of assets, we own about 400 megawatts of renewable energy, like wind turbines, solar farms, hydropower installations. And then these are some of the statistics in terms of the jobs created, the employment opportunities that come about, but also the energy savings that come out of the energy advice that then goes on to be given to people in the community that need it. And then this area I wanted to focus on the financing investment. Collectively, over the past 10, 15 years, the sector as a whole has mobilised about £225 million of investment into building energy infrastructure. Some of that was kind of 10, 20, 30,000 pounds at a time. Some were bigger projects. I think the biggest cooperatively owned project is a wind farm in Scotland where they raised £20 million, which is the biggest ever cooperative share raise. But yeah, between that, all the pieces add up to something pretty significant. It's actually, we collectively own have built more renewable energy than Ecotricity, Good Energy, and Octopus, in terms of other energy companies that are more familiar to people. I think Chris will cover this in a bit more detail, but in terms of the numbers from last year, in last year alone, the sector raised £24 million to invest in new projects and added growth in capacity. And yeah, there's a few more statistics about the impact that has come out of that just from a single year. Looking forwards, personally, I'm really excited because the new government coming in have been very vocally supportive of growing community energy. Ed Miliband and his team, the energy department, have this big mission to deliver a clean power grid by 2030, which will see a huge amount of growth in renewable energy. Personally, I think we have an opportunity here to not replicate the inequities we see in the fossil fuel energy system with renewables. I think we need to make the most of this window to make sure as much of this power that gets built is local and community owned. And as part of that, the government have said they're going to be publishing a local power plan by Christmas, hopefully. They've been talking about having a target of 8 gigawatts of local and community energy owned as part of that. So thinking where we are now, it's 400 megawatts, is 20 times growth of everything we've achieved to date over the next 5 years. And then in monetary terms, building 8 gigawatts of renewable energy is roughly £6 to £8 billion of capital investment. And plus kind of all the enabling work that goes into it could be up to 600 million in terms of having teams on the ground to identify the sites, get them through planning, get them bundled up into an investable proposition. So fingers crossed we'll know by Christmas the kind of level of resources that come out to help this growth. But it's great to work with people like Chris and just ourselves at JustMoney to get the word out of the potential here. And that's just electricity generation as well. There's obviously the need to install millions of heat pumps, switch cars to electric, home insulation, and that there are finance models that can help communities do that as well as invest in generation. Yeah, this is a kind of a good example of one of our members using the Ethex platform to raise money via a bond where people can invest their ISAs in that. Chris will cover that. But also not if the real value comes from combining the local renewable energy with using the electricity in our buildings. So combining solar and wind with heat pumps and electric car charging. That's where the real value comes from. I've done an exercise for a few local authority regions to kind of put this in terms the economic development teams understand. So if you add up all the money that people and businesses in a county or a region in England spend on paying for petrol and diesel and gas and imported electricity, it adds up to about £3 billion of money leaving our local economies. But if we create this world where instead of paying to import shipments of natural gas across from fracking fields in North America or sending money abroad to destabilize conflicts in the Middle East and Russia, you're instead giving your energy bill to a local social enterprise based in your community, or you're repaying loan finance for your heat pump or electric car back to savers and investors from your community. That's instead of 3 billion leaving, that's up to 3 billion staying within your community. And then that leads to community wealth building and regeneration, which I think could be supremely powerful if we replicate this in the 10,000 parishes around the country. But public awareness is a big challenge. Community energy is very under the radar still in terms of public awareness. So the events like this help greatly, and there is actually a community energy film coming out in cinemas this week, and we're going to be organising screenings all across the country. It's every street a power station, about this arty couple in London who during lockdown tried to raise money to put solar panels on every roof on their house. It's a really cute little fun story. But yeah, that every street a power station is a great slogan. It could be every church a power station, every football club a power station. Just rotate that street, every school a power station, and that we're going to be working with them over the coming months to really get the concept out there. Yeah, and then as a final kind of point of hope in all this, yeah, I think there's a real potential that if we do renewable energy rollouts as a community-led thing, then it can be a source of not division and resentment, but actually a source of civic pride. I collect village signs as I go around the country of people or villages that had their village windmill as their community emblem on their village sign. And I think, yeah, we valued this kind of technology infrastructure once, and I'd love to see that, yeah, community wind turbines or community solar become a kind of similar source of pride for people. So I'll leave it there. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, John. That was absolutely fascinating. Really good to see the practical examples and the stats, but also, yeah, the potential and the hope that's there. We're going to pass on to Chris now from Ethex, who's going to talk a little bit about the broader picture, but also, I think, some of the mechanisms by which you can invest in some of the things that John has been talking about. So I'll spotlight you now.
Thank you very much, Rosie. Yes, that's a really helpful introduction, John. Community energy forms quite a significant part of what we do at Ethex, it's a really good illustration of what we do. So let me just introduce Ethex briefly for those who haven't heard of us. We believe that money can, if used wisely, be a really powerful force for change in our communities and the environment. What we do is to connect impactful enterprises like the community energy organisations that John has described with investors who want to express their values in the way that they invest. So if we move on to the next slide, a great example of this is the big solar cooperative who raised £1.8 million with us over this last summer. The project was to turn a former coal mine into a solar farm. with a real emphasis on biodiversity. And interestingly, that they incorporated a significant proportion of second-hand solar panels into the project. So we think the success of this bond offer really demonstrates that there is continued support for action to combat climate change, despite what you might be hearing, seeing, reading in the media. We had allowed for 2 offers in order to raise the 1.8 million target, but we only needed 1. We were really very pleased indeed with the level of demand. If we move on to the next slide. Ethex operates, we support enterprises that aim to make a positive difference across 3 of our world's greatest challenges. So climate change is clearly one. Fractured communities, very topical at the moment, is another, as well as widening inequality. So as John highlighted, a good community energy cooperative will actually address all 3 of those by bringing a community together to work on projects that generate clean energy and where the surpluses are then channeled back into local community benefit. Ethex screens organisations wishing to raise capital on the platform, where we conduct careful due diligence to assess their impact, their governance, and their financial resilience. And we aim to ensure that all of the relevant risks associated with investing, and all investments do carry risk, are clearly highlighted to investors. We aim to build a deep understanding of sectors where we can be confident in the impact achieved, and those would include community energy, affordable finance, affordable homes, and indeed others. Next, please. So Ethex has been operating for 12 years now, and while still small in the context of the wider financial services industry, the cumulative impact of what our clients and investors have achieved is already material. We have over 27,000 investors now who have invested over £130 million into 200 projects right across the UK. In fact, if we include Energise Africa, which Ethex had a leading role in founding, and Ray will expand on later, that total rises to 175 million. It's important to note that these numbers significantly understate the value of what our clients go on to achieve. Funding through Ethex typically unlocks other sources of capital, such as borrowing from banks. And of course, as we all know, transforming lives and the natural world is beyond monetary value. It's priceless. If we move on to the next slide, please. Ethex itself is backed by some of the UK's leading social investment institutions and is highly regarded by its clients and customers. One of our key challenges and opportunities, helped by events like this, is that people are often delighted to discover that we exist. So we're trying to get the word out. So what is it that our investors actually buy? We'll show that on the next slide. Typically, there are 2 financial instruments, as we'd call them. One is community shares. Now, these are issued by community benefit societies of the type John has described. They're a bit different from ordinary shares. They're not traded on a stock market. They don't rise and fall in value, except in very specific circumstances. They pay a target rate of interest, which the issuer does have some flexibility over, so they help to manage the risks to the organization over time. Very importantly, they are the most inclusive financial instrument I've come across. So one member has one vote. not one share, one vote. It doesn't matter how much you invest, you only have one vote. So our minimum investment size is often £50. So it doesn't matter whether you're a £50 investor or a £100,000 investor, you have the same voting rights in that organisation. It's a great way of building genuine community. The other type of instrument that we offer is more familiar to many people. It's bonds that have a fixed term, might be 3 to 10 years, a known rate of interest, and we're able to offer our ISA umbrella, so investors can use their ISA allowance and earn their interest free of tax. We move on again, please. So just a couple of examples of the kind of investments on the platform. These two are there at the moment. One example of each, community shares and bonds, in fact. So Kent Community Energy is issuing community shares to install solar panels on community buildings in the county, cutting carbon emissions, reducing fuel bills for the users of those buildings, and generating long-term community benefit. Importantly, this particular offer is a springboard for much bigger things. As John highlighted, there are opportunities for these community energy groups to get
We seem to have temporarily lost Chris, who you may have just frozen for a moment. Let's just see, let's give him a minute to see if he's able to come back. Otherwise, we may need to move to our next speaker and come back to Chris for him to finish his presentation. Chris, can you hear us? Okay, I think Chris's internet may be causing some issues. We do have our next speaker on the call, Ray. I wonder if we can come to you next, and then hopefully we can come back to Chris to finish his presentation. Annie, could you flick forward in the slide so we can come to Ray's? I think Chris had almost reached the end of his presentation, but we will come back to him when he's back on the call. Ray, thanks so much for being with us. Can I hand over to you to introduce a little bit more about Energise Africa and the work that you're involved with?
Yeah, I'm just sending Chris a quick message just to see if I can find out offline whether he's able to rejoin or not.
Thanks, Ray. I appreciate
If I do hear back from him, then maybe we could put him back in, just so it could be a little bit disjointed for him to have to.
Yeah, well, we can bring him back for the Q&A hopefully, and we can pick up anything else that was missed at that point.
Yeah.
Thanks, Ray. Sorry to put you on the spot as well.
Not at all. Good afternoon, everybody. It's wonderful to be here. My name is Ray Coyle. I'm the CEO of Energise Africa. As Chris was just saying, Energise Africa was set up by Ethex as part of a process that also involved the UK government. So that the Foreign Office put out a call to ask organisations in the UK if somebody could set up a crowdfunding organisation that would raise funds in the UK to fund energy access in sub-Saharan Africa. And Ethex, along with a partner, bid for that work, and Energise Africa was born. With some funding from the UK government for the first few years. That was back in 2018, and we're still going. So we are a proud example of a UK government success story. Could you come on to the next slide, please? What we do, a little bit similar to Ethex, is we connect people in the UK who want to invest. We only do debt funding, bonds, and who want to earn money on their investment. We connect them directly with energy projects, energy access projects in sub-Saharan Africa. So we're very narrowly focused. We only do sub-Saharan Africa, quite a big place. We just do energy access and we just do debt. Slide, please. And the problem that we're here to address is that there are 600 million people without access to reliable energy in sub-Saharan Africa. So we're coming at this challenge in a slightly different way than John and Chris, in that we're not really talking about communities that have got access to reliable energy, but it's polluting reliable energy. We're frequently addressing communities that don't have access to any reliable energy at all. And what that generally means is that people are running maybe a diesel generator in a village or in a nearby village. And it's hugely damaging for people's lives and prospects. Education falls considerably behind when people don't have access to electricity because kids can't study at night. Frequently in Africa, it gets dark quite quickly and quite suddenly at 6 o'clock in the evening. So education suffers without access to electricity. Health suffers. Diesel generators are particularly inefficient and very, very polluting. They produce a lot more CO2 per kilowatt hour generated than the gas power stations that we have in places like the UK. So people's health suffers a lot. People's wealth also suffers. Diesel generators are expensive to run. Diesel is expensive to move around. It's expensive to procure in Africa. Frequently, there isn't the supply that's needed. And it also affects people's employment opportunities, and it affects the efficiency of their lives. Everybody has a mobile phone in the UK. There's huge mobile phone penetration in Africa. There's huge penetration of mobile payments across many countries in Africa. So people have phones and they need to charge them in order to live their lives and keep in contact. But if somebody's got to walk to the next village to charge their phone and wait around while it charges, it's a very inefficient way to run your life. So for all of these reasons, it's really important that people across Africa, and particularly in rural Africa, get access to clean power. Could I have the next slide, please? So there is a solution. As many of you will be aware, Africa is quite a sunny place. Solar power is fantastically efficient in Africa. The yield from solar panels in Africa is much, much higher than in the UK. It is a fantastic place to run solar energy. However, there's only about 23 gigawatts of installed solar across the entire continent of Africa. And that compares to 18 gigawatts in our little cloudy, rainy island that we live on. So there is a huge underutilization of the potential of solar energy in Africa. And we know, obviously, the sunshine is there. The technology is there. Solar technology has become much cheaper, much more efficient in recent years, as has battery technology. The price of batteries are coming down. So the products are there. The natural resource, the sunshine, is there. The entrepreneurs are there. The businesses are there. We invest in and we deal with some incredibly impressive and efficient and really, really great entrepreneurs in Africa. Lots of places in Africa are very, very entrepreneurial. Anybody who's ever been to Lagos will know that it's such an entrepreneurial place. It's quite exhausting after a few days. So the entrepreneurs are there, the businesses are there. What is missing is the capital. As we all know, if you want to do something in a clean and renewable way, there's more capital required up front. It costs more money to buy an EV than it does to buy a combustion engine car. It costs more money to put solar panels on your roof. There's a capital outlay. There's then a saving over time as people make the money from the savings in spending on petrol or spending on power from the grid if they've got solar panels. So it's affordable over time, but there is a capital outlay. There is a huge shortage of capital across sub-Saharan Africa because the financial infrastructure, the banks, the stock exchanges, the lending facilities, the credit facilities just don't really exist. And that leads to two problems. The first problem is that if a family in Africa wants to buy a solar home system for their home, frequently they can't afford to pay for that up front. So what they'll need to do is go to an organization that sells those and buy it on credit. But the organization that sells them therefore needs even more capital up front because they need the capital to buy the equipment, and then they need time in order to recoup that capital from the people they're selling the solar home systems to. So what all of that means is that there is a huge need in sub-Saharan Africa for capital in order to finance the move to solar. This is not about charity and altruism. The vast majority of people across sub-Saharan Africa can afford a solar home system, or can afford to pay for power once a mini grid is installed in their village, or can afford to rent a battery, can afford to pay for an electric motorbike if they're a boda rider over time, but what they lack is the upfront access to capital. We in the UK and across the developed world have vast amounts of capital. The amount that's in just savings accounts in the UK that is sitting there earning money is well over 2 trillion. So there's huge amounts of capital sitting in the rich developed world and a huge lack of capital in the developing world. And we are all in this together. There is very little point in the huge amount of effort that John and Chris and lots of other people are putting into developing community energy projects in the UK that will reduce emissions. We're all on the same planet. If over in Africa, where the population is going to increase from currently 1.5 billion to 2.5 billion people by 2050, if they are all using diesel generators and they are all using polluting energy, then we're not going to make this work. We have to have a global solution to what is a global problem. Could I have the next slide, please? Fantastic, thank you. So what do? We go and we find good businesses in sub-Saharan Africa. We have listed investment opportunities across Nigeria, Kenya, Democratic Republic of Congo, Uganda, Benin, South Africa, lots and lots of different places across Africa. We go, we travel, we work through lots of partners and other organizations to find good pioneering businesses, the ones that are getting out there into rural communities and the ones that are really making a difference in getting people access to energy where they need it. And then we list bonds from those companies on our website, and our investors subscribe for those bonds. We always have a minimum investment of £50 because we want this to be something that is available and accessible to everybody. We don't want to have a small number of very wealthy investors. We want this to be a community of investors that are putting a small amount of their money. We're not saying anybody should put all of their savings into this, putting a small amount of their money to work across the other side of the world for some of the most disadvantaged people to get them access to clean energy. And then those loans are repaid. Currently, they're mostly about 8% interest, and they'll run for about 3 years. Can I have next slide, please? And the funds are used in a number of different ways. So a lot of the companies we fund supply solar home systems and lanterns to homes. So a family will buy one, put the solar panel on the roof, they'll have a small battery in the house, and they'll be able to plug in and charge devices. And it could be anything from a small one that would just run a couple of lamps and charge phones, up to a bigger one that could run a fridge, cooker, etc. We fund green mini grids, and those are much more like the kind of projects that John and Chris are talking about, an array of solar panels. This would be in a village with batteries that will connect anything from a couple of hundred to a couple of thousand homes. We funded solar arrays on small businesses to enable more employment and more economic activity, and on affordable housing to make sure that when people get access to affordable housing, that they also get access to clean electricity. And we've also funded electric vehicles to enable boda riders, motorbike taxi riders, to have a clean vehicle that is also cheaper to run, so it increases their income. Next slide, please. And we choose the businesses we list based on the impact, because we are an impact lender. We want our projects to make a real difference. But we conduct very extensive financial due diligence to make sure that the businesses can repay the money. And we monitor and we go and visit and we sit down with and we oversee the dispersal of the funds, and we monitor these businesses very carefully to ensure that the investors are repaid. Next slide, please. So in terms of numbers, we've invested £45 million so far since 2018. And that's led to 750,000 people getting access to clean power and 850,000 tons of CO2 reduced. Offset, that's CO2 offset through people using solar rather than diesel gensets. And one number I just want to pause on is that 750,000. That's a lot of people who now have access to clean power, but it's not a lot compared to the 600 million problem that we're starting with. So we need to grow this and we need to go much, much further. Next slide, please. And then I just want to finish on two examples. And these are customers of our investees that we've met. Patience in Uganda, she was running a shop. She still runs a shop. And she was connected to a mini grid in Uganda. And what that enabled her to do is to massively expand the number of things that she was selling. Obviously, it's very hot in Uganda. So without access to electricity and therefore refrigeration, she wasn't able to sell fresh food. She can now sell cold drinks. You can sell cold drinks for a higher price than you can sell a drink off the shelf in Uganda. So her business has improved, her income has improved, and that gives her and her family better chances and better outcomes in life. And then last slide, please. And then this is another one that I want to highlight. Nima runs a restaurant in Goma. Many of you may have heard of Goma. It's in DRC. It was invaded earlier this year by the M23 rebels, and it's still under their control. About 400 people in Goma died. We fund a business called Altec that operates in the DRC. It was set up by two refugees who met in a refugee camp in Tanzania, and then went back to DRC to set up a company to provide clean electricity to their community. It's now a very substantial business. It employs 3,000 people. It turns over nearly $20 million every year. And they sell solar home systems. They don't do mini grids, it's all small systems. And Nima is one of their customers who we met in Goma, and she runs a restaurant. But in Goma, it gets dark at 6 o'clock. And when it gets dark, it gets very dark and you can't operate a business. So she was losing a huge amount of business. People were coming home from work and not able to go to her restaurant. With solar power, she can operate for much longer. She has a much more thriving business now, and she's employed a couple of people locally. So just being able to add clean electricity improves people's lives, not only through education, quality of life, but also the prospects that they have. And Nima and Patience are both people who can afford to pay for this. They're paying for the product. That's not the problem. The problem is getting access to that upfront capital. And that's what Energise Africa is here for. Thank you for listening.
Thank you so much, Ray. Thank you for a really powerful introduction to the work of Energise Africa and some tangible examples of what that positive impact looks like. We come to a time for questions now, and I can see a couple in the chat already, which is great. We do have Chris back on the call, and I will come to Chris in a moment to see if there's anything extra that he wanted to add to conclude his presentation. But I have a question just to kick us off, which is about the role of churches, faith communities, local community organisations in raising awareness, because I think we've all touched on the need for there to be greater awareness of the need and the possibility for investing in the types of solutions that we've heard about today. And I wonder if I can come to you first on that, John. What do you see as the role of churches and other local organisations in getting involved in this type of work?
I think there's probably two angles to this. One is that, just using your communities and your networks to bring more people into the world of community energy. Obviously, well, not obviously, but with on a national level, we're setting up a partnership with the Church of England's Net Zero Diocese teams. So we're trying to share resources to make community energy a more familiar option for people managing church estates and buildings and schools, to know what the kind of partnership potential is for delivering improvements to church buildings through a community energy route. But also we're finding when our members are doing share offers and bond raises, they may just be reaching the same people in their communities over and over again. So there is this need to broaden out beyond our kind of comfort zones and our bubbles to bring in everyone really, because that's what ultimately community energy is. It's for everyone who lives there, not just those that kind of in the clique to know about it. So broadening our appeal would definitely help. Yeah, and the second angle, kind of linking to the Energise Africa theme, is the church where I am in Suffolk. They have a twin partnership with a diocese in Tanzania called Kagera. And I think that kind of fairness about climate finance that Ray mentioned, about if governments in the developed world aren't fulfilling their commitments and transferring wealth, then let's do it peer to peer. Let's do it community to community. And if we are trying to converge on these kind of similar renewable energies, solar, smart grids, we're coming at it from one angle, they're coming at it from another, but there's probably, we can learn from each other and yeah, keep the money flowing in a virtuous circle, depending on where it's best deployed to have the best impact.
Thank you, John. Yeah, that's really helpful. Really good to think about both the ways in which churches might be serving their communities locally, but also acting in solidarity with other communities that they're connected with globally. So yeah, really lots of thoughtful things for us to explore there. There's a specific question in the chat for Energise Africa, which I'll come to you for, Ray. It says EA bonds often seem to sell out very quickly. What's the balance between supply and demand of funds like now and looking into the future? And a question about how Energise Africa is funded. So yeah, it'd be great to hear a bit more about that from you. Thanks.
Yeah, sure, and thank you for the questions. So in response to the bond selling out quickly, that can happen, and we find that demand kind of ebbs and flows. It's a little bit unpredictable sometimes. So bonds can sell out really quite quickly, but what we do try and make sure is that we have a level playing field. We tell all of our registered users at the same time when the bond launches to give everybody the same opportunity to invest. We think we've been doing a lot of work over the last year to build our pipeline of investments. And as I look forward now, unbelievably, I'm starting to look at and think about 2026, and it seems like 2025 only started about 5 minutes ago, but we're now, that's where we are. And as we look forward to 2026, I think we're going to have a lot of demand for funding. We've got some really interesting projects coming through in Chad, in more projects in DRC. We're looking to fund a big mini grid in a refugee camp in Kenya, for some of really the most disadvantaged people in the world. So at this moment in time, when I look for the next 12 months, I think we're going to have a lot more demand for investors. So one of the things, and I think to echo what John was saying, one of the opportunities I think here is to introduce this concept via churches and church organizations to people, because I don't think that there are many people out there who think about Africa outside a philanthropy context, and who do think about Africa in terms of I can subscribe for a bond, I could make my money available, then I could get it back, and something really good and exciting could be done with it. The second question is about how we're funded. We're very transparent about it. We charge the company in Africa 5% of the amount that we raise to cover all of our costs. So if a company raises £500,000 on our website, then they'll pay us £25,000. We don't take a cut from the interest that they pay the bondholders. That's entirely separate. And that's how we fund everything. We do also get some grants at the moment. So we've got a couple of organizations that provide us with grant funding to bridge the gap, because the 5% that we charge doesn't pay our overheads, and we try and keep our overheads really as low as humanly possible. But there's a lot of costs to this in terms of travel and due diligence and running the platform, etc., etc. So at the moment we're not making ends meet, and we need some grant support, which we're getting. But the aim is that we will increase the amount of funding that we're providing to businesses in Africa, and the 5% bit will go up and up and up until we hit a break-even point and then we'll be happy.
Thank you, Ray. A question from Jeff. We've heard of success stories, but what's the experience of losses, failed projects? Obviously, there's a level of risk involved. Chris, could I come to you for comment on that question because of your, I guess, the breadth of experience that you've had at Ethex across the board?
Yes, yeah, no, it's absolutely a fair question. We're transparent about this too on the websites. Same for Energise Africa as well as Ethex. And yes, all investments carry risk. We're quite clear on that. We've got 12 years experience with Ethex, and our experience to date is that about 3% of the offers that we've done in that time period have well, those enterprises have ceased trading, so that's a loss, that's a write-off. There's an additional proportion where the interest that's been paid hasn't necessarily matched the target. I mentioned community shares earlier, so you know, those interest rates are variable, and that's deliberate to preserve the organization itself. So there's about another 10% where that interest received may have dipped below the target, but in some cases it will only have dipped a small amount and then recovered. And the risks across different sectors, types of enterprise clearly vary. So actually in the community energy space, I think we can actually say we've got 100% success record, which is truly remarkable when you think about the loss ratios of involved in investing in small businesses of any type. So I think that's testament to the commitment, actually, not least of the people running these organisations.
Thank you, Chris. There was a question earlier on, which I'm not sure we've got time to delve much into, which is about the tech side of community energy and how it works. I just wondered, John, could you point us towards some resources that might help answer that? Is there something that you could share with us we can send out in the email afterwards?
Yeah, sure. We have a how-to section of our website, which is also going to be updated in a few weeks, but that's got lots of resources about both the kind of the tech and business model side, but also the kind of governance side of doing these projects. And you may be lucky enough to have some retired engineers in your community that are willing to put their time in, and there's
I can well imagine
there support too.
Yeah, people on the call who are interested both in investing in community shares and supporting projects that way, but also in churches that may be able to get involved more practically in the setting up of community energy projects. So yeah, it'd be great if we can share some of those. Question from Rita, which I think is a question we often get asked. Often people at different points in life come into a sum of money and want to use it well. So Rita's talking about some money that she's inherited. She's not looking for the highest form of interest, but doesn't want to leave it in a savings account where it could be helping to develop communities. Would any of you be able to comment on the kind of what's reasonable return on investment to expect from ethical investment, or anything that kind of speaks to that question of how do we make our money work well and have an impact when it's maybe something we haven't explored before? Come to Chris first on that.
Shall I have a first go at that? Well, I suppose you've seen from the thumbnails of the actual investments that are being offered on our platforms. The interest rates might vary between, in the current market, about 5 to 8%, bearing in mind that there is risk associated. That's specifically with our investments. Now, we are not financial advisors, and you made the point, Rosie, at the start that we would encourage anybody to take advice from a qualified financial advisor. It's fair to point out that direct investments in relatively small enterprises of the type you've been hearing about today would be classified by the Financial Conduct Authority as high risk. And they would give a guideline broadly that one shouldn't commit more than 10% of one's available capital for investment to high risk investments. So there's a rule of thumb, if you like, for it. But there are plenty of there's a whole spectrum of ways of thinking about these investments, and towards when we're talking about the kind of activities that Ray's involved with, we know some of our investors sort of look at Energise Africa in a way as adjacent to philanthropy. It's not the same, but it's a way of applying their funds in such a way to generate immense impact and be able to replicate that, recycle it, so get actually generate more out of the same sum of money, not replacing philanthropy. That is one potential perspective. Then perhaps then there's a lower risk end of the impact ethical spectrum, where you might be expecting something closer to a market rate of return, or the kind of interest that you might get on a deposit or a financial bond.
Thank you, Chris. And I know in your presentation slides, which we will circulate afterwards, you have a slide that looks at that spectrum of different ways of thinking about investment. So we'll make sure people have that as well.
Well, could I just add one thing to what Chris has said in response to Rita's question? It's really important to spread your investment around. Don't put all your eggs in one basket. And one of the ways that you can help yourself to reduce your risk is, even if you're going to say, well, I'll put 10% into relatively high risk ethical investments, put it into multiple investments. One of the reasons that we're not a fund, we don't take people's money and then decide where it goes. We want to give people the opportunity to decide what kind of projects they care about, but that also gives people the opportunity to pick multiple different projects. And when your minimum level is down at £50, there's no reason to have all your eggs in one basket. So there's ways that you can protect yourself and still have really impactful investment.
Thank you, Ray. That's a really helpful place. I think we will stop there. There's so many more questions that I would like to ask, and I know that others would like to ask, but you've given us so much to think about today, and lots of resources and links to explore further. So I want to say a very big thank you to Ray and to John and to Chris for joining us today. And if we could have the final slides up in a moment. We'd also like to ask all of you on the call to share your feedback with us. We run webinars like this often, not just during Good Money Week. We also put together training for local churches that can be run online or in person. And it's really helpful for us to know what you want from us and what can help you take action. So I'm going to share a very short poll on the screen now, and would welcome both your feedback on today, but your thoughts on what would be useful in the future, so that we can plan for following up on some of the things that we've touched on today. So I'll give you a moment to complete that, and that'll be really helpful for our forward planning. And then if you can skip forward, Annie, just to the final slides. I just wanted to share with you one very practical step that churches can take towards impact investing, which is through the Green Investment Declaration, which is an initiative that we work on at Just Money Movement with Operation Noah. We have a webinar coming up on the Green Investment Declaration, which I'll share in the link in the email that goes out. So I won't give it lots of time now, but just to say that it's an encouragement for churches to go on a journey towards investing in climate solutions. So starting off simply by looking at your investment policies and making sure they reflect the values of your church and your intention to invest in climate solutions, and then going on a journey towards investing at least 5% of assets in climate solutions within the next few years. And there's lots of resources and support to help you in discerning whether that's the right step for your church to take and accompanying you on the journey. So I just wanted to flag that up as a very practical step that could be taken by local churches. And finally, there should be some links. Yeah, there we go. Some links. We'll send these around in the email afterwards. If you're wanting to explore more around your own investments, there are resources on the Just Money website in the Money Makes Change Hub. If you want to get involved in campaigning for a more just use of money for the wider financial system, then again, there are ways that you can take action there. And we'd encourage you to join our network of Just Money champions, who are people that are passionate about connecting money, faith and justice, and talking to others in their community. So perhaps you've got really excited about community energy today and you want to get others involved. Do join the Just Money Champions website network, and we can encourage you to do that and share resources and training with you. So thanks very much for joining us. Look out for the recording that will come in the next few days. And if you have any questions, then do get in touch. Thanks very much for joining. Goodbye.